It was business as usual in Springfield Wednesday afternoon. Governor J.B. Pritzker delivers his State of the State address days after Congress came to a halt in Washington, D.C.
I listened in on what Illinois achieved last year and what Governor Pritzker says the state is set to accomplish in 2026.
Love is a superpower. It teaches the brittle to bend. It shows the selfish how to share. It grants courage to the coward.
Education, economy, electricity, and ending what Governor J.B. Pritzker calls injustice to Illinoisans caused at the hands of Donald Trump and his administration.
It is impossible to tally the hours, days, and weeks that our state government has spent chasing news of presidential executive orders, letters, and edicts that read like proclamations from the Lollipop Guild.
During Wednesday afternoon's State of the State address, Governor Pritzker voiced his concerns against the president's motives, but didn't let the national spotlight overcrowd what's happening in the Prairie State.
Illinois is among the best in the nation. Only one state outpaced Illinois in 8th grade reading scores, and only 4 states outpaced Illinois in 8th grade math scores. We're leading the pack because of sustained investments in education.
Lending a helping hand to residents who can't afford to put a roof over their heads, Governor Pritzker announced the Building Up Illinois Developments, or BUILD plan, created to meet the rising housing demand.
An initiative to lower housing costs by making it easier, faster, and more effective to build homes in Illinois.
With the goal of bringing more families to the state, the governor announced a new initiative to speed up the production of clean energy nuclear reactors.
Illinois is already #1 in clean nuclear energy production. That is a leadership mantle that we must hold on to. Producing even more energy is vital to keep up with increasing demand and bring down prices.
Illinois 45th District Senator Andrew Chesney spoke before Pritzker's address, saying in part, J.B. Pritzker has been setting the stage for the last several months to blame all of his budget problems on the White House. You've seen him in the media whining about federal cuts, playing the victim card instead of taking ownership. He has to get back to the state of Illinois and stop running for a higher political office.